Alright guys, we have another example here. Find sine of pi over 3 plus pi over 2 using the reference angle method. So the first thing we probably want to do is simplify this inside parentheses. What you're going to want to do is find a common denominator. The common denominator here is probably 6. So we're going to find common denominators, and let's multiply the left side by 2 on the top and bottom, and then the right side by 3 on top and bottom. The reason why we're doing 2 on this side and 3 on this side is so we can get a product of 6 on both sides. When I multiply fractions, I want to multiply the numerators, then the denominators. So if I have 2 over 2 times pi over 3, I'm going to multiply 2 and pi first in the numerator, and then I'll divide it by 2 times 3, which is 6. And I'll do the same thing on this side. So I'll multiply 3 and pi, and then 2 and 3. So it'll simplify to this. So I get 2 pi over 6 plus 3 pi over 6. So let's see what else we can do here. Then we can add the numerators together. So I get 2 pi plus 3 pi over 6. And what does that simplify to? 5 pi over 6. So 5 pi over 6, that's the actual angle that's in question here. What is sine of 5 pi over 6? So how do we go about evaluating that? Well, you probably first want to find where 5 pi over 6 is on a graph, right? 5 pi over 6 will land us in the second quadrant. And since we're using the reference angle, we had to find what the reference angle is. So don't forget what the reference angle is. The reference angle is always the angle between the given angle, 5 pi over 6, and the x-axis. So here is our given angle, 5 pi over 6, and here's the x-axis. So the angle between is probably going to be right here. This is the angle between our given angle and the x-axis, and this is also our reference angle. So how do we find what the value of that angle is? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take this angle and subtract this angle from it, and it'll leave us with this middle angle. So we're going to take pi and subtract from it 5 pi over 6. So pi minus 5 pi over 6 is the same as saying 6 pi over 6 minus 5 pi over 6. And if I simplify that, my reference angle is equal to pi over 6. So this little shaded region right here, which is our reference angle, he is pi over 6 radians. So that means, using the reference angle method, that sine of this big angle, 5 pi over 6, is equal to plus or minus, we're not sure which one yet, sine of our reference angle, pi over 6. So sine of this angle is plus or minus sine of our reference angle, this angle. So what is sine of pi over 6? Sine of pi over 6 is 1 over 2. Unfortunately, that's something that you gotta kind of memorize, but don't worry, it's only one of the 4 things you have to memorize in our unit circle. Anything 90 degrees or less, you're gonna have to memorize, but once you remember that first quadrant, you'll know how to compute any angle in the other 3. So don't worry, it's not that bad. So sine of pi over 6, or sine of 30 degrees, is 1 over 2. So far we have a statement saying that sine of 5 pi over 6 is equal to plus or minus 1 over 2. Now, is it positive 1 over 2 or is it minus 1 over 2? How do we know? Well, what we have to do is we have to look at the quadrants. Don't forget our little mnemonic device, right? All students take calculus. Our angle, 5 pi over 6, is in the second quadrant. And what trig functions are positive in the second quadrant? Well, sine. Sine is positive in the second quadrant. And we're dealing with sine here, right? So this means that our value is positive. Our answer is sine of 5 pi over 6 equals 1 over 2.